All right, all right, all right. Josh, and you have a few slides that you want to present? The click is right there.
Absolutely. Let me give this a shot. Big green button, only one of them, right? Do I see anything?
Yeah, they're behind you.
Oh, they're behind me.
It's not showing on the monitor.
Oh, can I go backwards? Okay. Perfect. So first of all, thanks for not only having me, but doing this. The crypto renaissance is real. It's not a meme. It's not made up. It's not promotional. It's actual, literal, and historical. And you get to not only witness it, but witness it knowingly today. And not only witness it, but participate in it, which is significant. You know, it's an odd historical fact that people who live to see the greatest transformations of any time tend to appreciate it the less, or they're the least aware of it. And so today we have an epic opportunity to do something meaningful and to not only help shape the outcomes of the world that's going to be, also to help mitigate unintended consequences and make a better world. You get those opportunities rarely ever in history, and so let's go ahead and do that today. All right, that did change the slide? That didn't change the slide. There we go. I was just making fun of people for not being able to use this, so that's how that happens. How many PhDs does it take to hit a button? So why should you listen to anything I have to say? I am a PhD in late medieval and Renaissance history, Fulbright, Sorbonne, University of Paris, blah, 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 blah. Spent decades working with these documents we're going to talk about. And so when I'm saying this, I'm not saying this haphazardly. There's real historical reasons to think this is a Renaissance. There were dozens of Renaissances before the last one. We've just forgotten about them all because the last one was so bright it eclipsed all the others. And so too, this crypto Renaissance will eclipse the last one. You know, when we in the future say the word Renaissance, we won't think of Florence or we won't think of any of the wonderful things we saw today. We'll think of now. And that's a crazy claim to make, but I'm going to try to do that in just a couple of minutes, and then we'll have a conversation about some of these ideas that I introduce. But in order to do that, I need to introduce you to someone who's going to seem very odd, but is fundamentally truly similar to you today, and that is medieval you. And so medieval you may or may not recognize yourself in the mirror, but medieval you, have you ever wondered what it would be like to live in a different time or in a possible world, a different reality? Like statistically speaking, medieval you is a farmer. You're working dusk until dawn for subsistence, and it's hard, and you do it every single day. You've done it year after year. Your parents did it, their 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 parents did it, and about 4 more sets of those. That's who you are. You aren't able to accumulate capital or wealth. It's land, and you don't have rights to that. You don't really have rights to coin. You can't spend it. There's things called sumptuary laws that limit how you can spend your money, much less transact. If you had an idea to change this, you wouldn't be able to communicate it. You can't read. You can't write. The documents of power are in a different language that's privileged. And even that's in Siglia that only certain people can read. These two things form your identity, and it's been static for 1,000 years. No exaggeration, no hyperbole. You are a farmer, and your name is farmer. You are a smith, and your name is smith, and that's who you are. In one word, your world is fundamentally hierarchical. We saw these images earlier today. Also note, this is a pyramid. And where are you looking at it? You're at the bottom looking up. That's no joke. That was by intention. When they built these things, they did it to communicate a message. They're going to reinterpret it. And I realize I'm mixing Renaissance and Reformation, but I'm doing this intentionally for a point I'll make a little bit later. This is the best artistic impression of their worldview. There is the divine, there are saints, there is the papal seat, there are cardinals, archbishops, bishops, curates, prelates, deacons, subdeacons, priests, and 50 feet of shit, and then there's you. Your political reality is the same. There is the Holy Roman Emperor, arch-electors, electors, upper noblesse, lower noblesse, city magistrates, regional magistrates, city magistrates, another 50 feet, and that's you looking up. That's your reality for 1,000 years. That's what I mean by hegemony. That's where you are. On the eve of the Renaissance and Reformation, that's where you were. You were medieval. You couldn't communicate currency. You couldn't pay for anything. You couldn't accumulate wealth or pass it down. You had no opportunity to change your reality. You wouldn't be able to communicate and to organize to do something around that. And that was both those two axes sealed your identity. Now, of course, that's not us today, right? We're very different. We're not medieval. We're smart. We're modern. We're scientific. Maybe. We believe it. Oh, hey, what? All right, there we go. I definitely shouldn't have been making fun of people for that. Now I see. Only now do I understand. Okay. So if one word describes your world, it's permissioned. And that was then. Now it's very, very different, isn't it, right? We're smart. We have science. We're about ready to get rid of this material stuff. We're going to transcend to the metaverse, right? You're not going to have to deal with any of this anymore. The thing about it is, though, medieval you wouldn't have realized that they were permissioned. You would have had no idea. It never would have entered your mind that you were at the bottom of that hierarchy. You only see it now. It's the air you breathe. Just like if you talked to yourself 10 years ago and said, hey, join a DAO, you couldn't have done that. You wouldn't have mentally been able to understand the concept, and you wouldn't have had the technology available to do it. Value. You can do whatever you want with your money, right? Yeah, maybe. Your Robinhood account, maybe let's not, Robinhood's too fresh. Let's say your Fidelity account, that's real, right? Your Fidelity account, you think you own that stock? You don't own that stock, you own an IOU from that middleman. They can take that at any time. Oh, but you can spend your money with your card? If you use in America, I shouldn't say the name, if you use certain credit cards to purchase tickets to an event like a crypto event, I've had this happen to me, Bitcoin Miami, for a team member. They won't process it. When you get on customer service, they say, we know it's not fraud. We don't like the content of the event, so we're not going to process that. That's not a joke. No shit. Communication, you can communicate anything, anytime, right? Until you get deplatformed. That's for those crazies. That's not for us, right? Historically, that doesn't tend to work out so well, but maybe they won't do that at any layer of the stack or protocol. Maybe it'll be the broadcast. We had Arab Spring. That won't happen again. They know how to cut the cord. The broadcast layer on Web 2 is gone. Even if I still am able to communicate, maybe they'll do something worse. Maybe they'll let me keep talking. They'll just harvest the fruits of my work and mine it for their product. They'll transmute me alchemaically into their product. Both these things fuse in my identity. Can I do it? I cannot do it. I can do it. All right. So at the eve of the Renaissance, at the end of the late Middle Ages, medieval you, just like you today, has no idea that you're in this kind of bondage, that you are fundamentally permissioned. Only now are you beginning to see the opportunities that are out there and understand the true significance of the word Renaissance. So what happened? What happened last time as a historian, and this is why I'm no longer a historian, and this is why I'm a repentant academic trying to atone for my previous sins in the academy, because I'm going to use an image to help people understand things, and you're definitely not supposed to do that. I see history as a pendulum swinging back and forth between aggregation and disaggregation. It's a model, it's a heuristic construct, it's like making an atom out of macaroni. It's not the thing itself, it's an image. But when you swung from aggregation, where you were at the end of that cosmic pile of shit, to where you are today, still in it, you just don't realize it, as it starts to swing back, how does that happen? Is it means of production? I don't think so. Is it great men with great ideas? I definitely don't think so. I haven't met a lot of them. I actually think it's communities making history, and that sounds cool, like something you put on your VW bus, but I mean that very specifically in a way that they create history through vectors of technology. Not just any technology, not like certain hedge funds saying it's just 19th century cars and telephones. I mean specifically through decentralized technology. The powers in decentralized technology, and it works through those axes. Value. Medieval you wasn't aware, just like medieval yous out there who aren't here aren't aware, that half a continent away, some guy was doing that Renaissance thing, and he went back to the sources, ad fontes, and he came up with this crazy idea of ledger-based accounting. He actually rediscovered it from Pliny in North Africa. He dusted off a book, and bam, and it was magic. It was literal magic, just like when they rediscovered the zero. It was metaphysical ability to instantiate reality. It was literally debit and credit. And long story short, transactions, loans, thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, and the creation of a new class, shopkeepers, proto-mercantile. Communication. The printing press was a really bad idea. Every VC, I guarantee, every VC would have kicked Gutenberg out of their office on Sand Hill Road. Who's going to bring a protocol to market when only 5% of the people use it? Only 5% were literate. That doesn't make any sense. That's disastrous. That's the first thing you learn to get your Harvard MBA, isn't it? The crazy thing is that decentralized technology has power in and of itself, and the community adapted around that. So you couldn't read. We think of Gutenberg's big Bible. Most of it was Flugschriften. It was a big broadsheet with an image, new technology. Medieval you's never seen art. You haven't seen it. You haven't seen a window. You haven't seen glass. You haven't even seen your own reflection unless it's raining in a puddle. And now all of a sudden you see these sheets of images by Dürer and Lucas Cranach the Elder, and they're showing you stuff. It's exposing art to the masses and reinterpreting reality. And what the content they released was toppling this hegemonic tower down. Martin Luther accounted for over 50%, one guy, of stuff printed in any given year. That makes Stephen King like an amateur, right? Like, think of it. And what was he doing? Yes, he did technical academic philosophy, ontology, epistemology, technical religious things we're not so into anymore. But he also did something else where he basically started shitposting with memes, and he was really good at it. He employed these awesome artists that we love to essentially load up with semiotic charge that this hegemony was illegitimate, and he used these two types of decentralized technology to unwind it. So what happened? Within one generation, the early adopters, those guys were known as the Medici, they took the papal seat and they took the throne of France. Bam, they were new on the scene. And within one generation, there's literally hundreds of thousands of new shop. You're no longer a farmer. You can open up a shop on a microloan. And that idea came to you in print that you read. And rather than just having art and the holy that you don't have access to, the Medici and everyone participating in this movement didn't grossly take their wealth and buy their way into society. That's not true at all. That's undergraduate stuff. That's not true. What they actually did was they reinterpreted their reality. There was holy and there was profane, and they basically said the meaningful stuff isn't locked away from the world. It's meaningful to participate in the world with your job, your business, your family, and your community. That's why you see that ubiquitous fruit bowl, because there's value and meaning and sacredness in the everyday and the mundane. So anyway, the other thing I should say is that the art actually reflected the technology of the time. And so that print was new, you'd seen it. Medieval art was 2D, flat, symbolic. And when you saw the things you saw today that Josh presented, they were like AR or VR. They're absolutely unreal. They caused you to think about reality differently. So today, we have a similar choice. Can we take steps towards, whoa now, not even touching it, talk about magic. If history repeats, and it tends to do this, and again, this isn't a roadmap, but this is what tends to happen. History unwinds, hegemony unwinds, community makes history, and they use decentralized technologies along a certain teleology, a certain path. First, they start with finance, because that's the most value. Then they move into culture, which is community creating goals and values and organizing through those communication protocols. Then work, the mechanisms to instantiate that in the real world. And then education and EDU to propagate it. And then finally, IRL, which is really kind of silly to talk about the metaverse in those terms, but the idea is that crypto becomes everything. We don't think of it differently. Just like there's not internet funds and internet companies, it's everything. It's decentralized economic and social coordination engines powering everything. And the metaverse, in that sense, with NFTs as contracts for things synthetic and things in real life, act as bidirectional two-way doorways that let you work in the synthetic world, enjoy the fruits in the real world, work in the real world, enjoy the fruits in the synthetic world. And so we aren't floating off to space, we're rather opening up new worlds. Just like print did. You had never thought of an imaginary idea or a story or a novel, and now these books are opening up new worlds, and so too today. So if you're interested in this stuff, There's no way I'm going to be able to scan through this, but there are 9.5 theses giving you more detail about this. We'll make the slides available. And for people who are interested in going through more of this, there's things on politics and nation state and what happened. Talk about Baudrillard and Foucault and Chardin if you're into that sort of stuff. There's oh man, we could do that all night. There's a bibliography for folks that are still interested in reading things. There's definitions for your friends and family, because of course you guys know everything. And there's more. There's more of this sort of stuff and talk elsewhere. This is an example of Lucas Cranach the Elder and the awesome Renaissance painter. And by the way, they always put themselves in the paintings very subtly, so this is my homage to this. Although you have to admit it does bear a striking resemblance in form and function. This is also the same guy. This is him shitposting with a meme. Lucas Cranach the Elder, the guy who did that, is Luther's bro, the bar tavern brawling guy who's doing this on a woodcut. And what they're saying, this is what caught the world on fire. They basically said, hey, you're giving us papal bulls telling us what we're doing is wrong, and that's, fire and brimstone pouring out. And they did what all good people fighting hegemonically and how they express resistance. They pulled down their pants and they flatulated in the general direction of the figure. That's a fancy academic way for saying farted.
But
and the other picture inside.
This level of blasphemy, like...
Absolute blasphemy. Yeah. No, absolutely. I'm giving you a lot to unpack. We're done in a minute. And then when they got really crazy, they showed their adversaries being birthed or being pooped out by demons. There's a Medusa demon suckling one of their adversaries. I mean, I can't emphasize enough the world was ending and this is absolute chaos, which takes us, I guess, to the end of the presentation. So wait, let me try that one more time. Always available to chat. The thing I'd leave you with is the crypto renaissance is not BS. It's actually real. The historical analogies and rhymes are very tight. Usually, you never have a chance to witness knowingly, much less participate, and use the tools of history to craft your outcomes, manage unintended outcomes, build community and identity. And so we have fantastic opportunity we've heard about. I'd also like to invite you to exercise responsibility, the flip side of the coin, and I'm always happy to chat about that. Thank you. Was that 5?
Yeah, we got a couple minutes. So,
okay.
Josh, I just have a couple of questions to further contextualize this just a little bit. So, I love the idea.
Also, can we get applause for? I don't think anyone understands that what Josh and MobileCoin has done here, right?
Okay.
Let's not be shy and bashful about this. Thank you.
Thank you. So, I'm so intrigued by this idea of scalable blasphemy with Martin Luther. It's like the original sort of mimetic propagation of systems, and just at a scale it's unimaginable. And we have all of that now. One thing I wanted to talk about actually was sort of the ascent of the papacy, the sort of way that the papacy decided to excommunicate the Holy Roman Emperor, and the process of that happened there, and the way that property rights were connected to that. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Oh man, that's yeah, we can do that. I guess I should start by saying, when you look at that image, you think it's ridiculous. It's obviously very easy to make fun of the Pope. But the Pope wasn't just the religious figure. He was the foundation of all cosmic and political, military, economic, property rights, order in the universe, right? So when Luther was doing that and saying this whole tower is illegitimate, he's taking a sharp knife with a meme that was virally loaded. It was semiotic in function. It had meaning greater than itself. It was even mimetically charged where there's value associated, opportunity to change your life. And he was poking at that source of authority. That's very similar to us saying money, printer, go burr. We don't have a medieval pope. We have a US-based petrodollar, right? And when we say money, printer, go burr, that's us doing the same thing in those 4 or 5 words, basically saying that's illegitimate. And so the pope was much more important than that. So what happened was there was a contest of authority for hundreds of years between the church and the state, if you want to use that, between the Holy Roman Empire and between the Pope. And they fought it out, and essentially the Pope won. And the Pope won in such a big way, he had the Holy Roman Empire begging his forgiveness, literally, in rags and penitential garb on the snow, saying, please, please, please forgive me, because he'd been excommunicated. And that happened like around the turn of the Middle Ages when things got real. And the way the Pope won was when he excommunicated him, it wasn't a matter of personal faith. Their reality was supernaturally charged. It wasn't just material. It had connective tissue tied into technology, believe it or not. And so all of the Holy Roman Empire was at the top of his pyramid, and all of the bonds of fidelity, all of the economic contracts, all of the chain of transmission, all of the property rights, they instantly dissolved like magic.
So with one stroke, excommunicating the Holy Roman Emperor, all contract law was dependent on being part of the church. And so all of the relationships between the Holy Roman Emperor and the soldiers, all of the property rights that were conferred upon the military and the state, they evaporated in one stroke and became the property of the papacy. Just like that. And then you watch the way that that power moved through the world for hundreds of years and was only disrupted by the power of mimetic propagation from Martin Luther. And so we are living in a world right now where we have a lot of very powerful systems in the world, but also an ability to propagate information at a scale that has never existed before. If you look at the way that information moves around the world, the way that there's fake news and real news and the difficulty of telling the difference between them, we're at a point in time where information systems are abundant, but also difficult to discern whether they're true or false. Can you talk a little bit about the way that this is playing out in the world now?
This isn't being recorded, is it? No, that's a joke. Yeah, no, that's a much better summary of tying that together, and that's true. Their world was unraveling. They literally thought when Drur's doing his apocalyptic dream, and when Luther's showing his four horsemen, it's not hyperbole. They literally thought the world was going to end, right? For them, for 1,000 years, the divine realm instituted here on earth was headed up by one guy. And the prophecy said that whenever the Antichrist came, he would take that throne. And Luther was essentially saying, he's Antichrist, meaning Satan's grabbed the keys to the church. The world's over. It's done. So all the art you see that we kind of don't like to talk about in polite company, the crazy stuff that I found, some of the stuff you showed, it's fascinating. That's what they thought. The world was literally going to end. And that seems kind of crazy, but if we take a step back and we talk about that pendulum swinging, each and every time the pendulum swings from aggregation where there's a tight order and we know things, we have a tight epistemology, we know how we know things, right? In a standard materialistic enlightenment world. And we know how things are actually ordered, the ontology of it, like how stuff shakes out. When it starts swinging back, everything gets unraveled. There's competing chains, there's competing knowledges, there's competing beings and realities, and we get nervous. It's very uncomfortable, it doesn't feel great, and we naturally get nervous. And that's kind of the price to play. That's the ante to the table when the pendulum starts swinging back. So what we're seeing is exactly what happened, at the end of the late Middle Ages and the Renaissance, and even the previous Renaissances, previously, any time before. Yeah, there's a bifurcation of reality, and you don't know what to believe. And what tends to happen is things tend to get even more pluralistic until we become comfortable with it, which might not be a comforting thought, but future you, 500 years from now, who looks back at current you with some guy like me, some jackass yapping about saying, imagine you 500 years ago, they're going to think back at you saying, oh, you thought things were so hierarchical, of course they're pluralistic. I don't know if that's clear.
Well, so the thing that I wanted to point out, and I agree with everything you said, but I think the thing that I want to point out is sort of an optimistic viewpoint, which is that there are times when the world descends into chaos, and people who enjoy order often will say that this is the end of the world. And then there's a period of time where chaos goes back into order, and there's people who like chaos who say it's the end of the world. And if you look at the last 100,000 years of human civilization, they're always wrong. Yep. It's not the end of the world. And so I think this is the sort of beautiful thing that I'm seeing now is just whether you like chaos or order, it goes back and forth. And the only thing that you can do is to be optimistic about the future, optimistic that we will have the possibility for change in society. And to me, one of the things that is most important for the possibility of change is privacy. It allows us to have the freedom of thought, the freedom of expression. If Martin Luther didn't have the ability to create mimetic systems, if the Gutenberg press hadn't been invented, we might still be under a theocracy.
Yeah.
And so I think it's really important to think about privacy. Can you talk a little bit about privacy in the Middle Ages and the
Yeah,
transition?
that's a great point. And something else he said, I mean, just like let the power of what he said sink in, right? So the Holy Roman Empire fought with the Pope for like hundreds of years. Tens of thousands of men died trying to topple him, and that didn't work. It was a meme, it was an image off decentralized technology, it was completely crazy. These things are much more powerful than we might think. And I guess the other thing that you said, which is super important, is that it always feels like it's the end of the world. That's a price you pay for when things swing back. One might even take a step back and say, how does it really, I'm using this pendulum swing as an example. You might say, does it swing? I tend to think it swings up optimistically, right? So we take steps towards self-sovereignty, swings back. We take some more steps more towards self-sovereignty. And in this Reformation, so privacy was always, it didn't exist. And one of the tools of control in the late Middle Ages and after the Renaissance and after the Reformation, when aggregation struck back and the nation state rose again, the tool of the control that they used was anti-privacy, specifically contracts, like physical contracts. If you wanted to own something, if you wanted to keep your information private, it had to be within a specific geographical sphere around you. And you didn't have access to that. You couldn't control it. In fact, you weren't even allowed into it. And if they wanted to seize something, they could seize that document. It wasn't portable, you couldn't touch it. And so that's also why I think, privacy in terms of the communication protocols, even privacy in terms of having some of the NFTs is not just pixelated cats, but like on-chain rights for this is fundamentally significant. And in that the war that's going to happen, or the battle that's going to happen, I honestly don't see, I'm going to take a step back. When the nation state rose up again, the tool they used was observation for control. A lot of people think that it's only the belligerent nation states that have to beat their people around. That's not usually how it goes. If you have to beat your people around, you as a nation state get an F. That's not good PR, and it's not good for your economics. If you have to threaten them, you get a C. That's pretty good. If it doesn't even enter their mind, they get an A. How would you do that? What kind of panopticon, laden society with observation control would you need to be able to create that state? You'd have to craft language, you'd have to craft identity, and you do that around observation. And that's essentially what the height of the nation state, I don't mean US today, I mean starting out with post-Renaissance and Reformation into, Louis and the Sun King and all this sort of stuff. They observed everyone, everything was subject to control. You didn't control your own documents, your own finance, your own communication, and the rights to anything was physically proxied by someone else other than yourself. A lot of political historians say, hey, even the idea of a nation in control, that was something that you never would have thought of. Medieval you wouldn't have known that you were a citizen of a nation. That didn't exist, right? You belonged to a village, you belonged to a community, you belonged with other people. When they wanted to control, they said, hey, there's a thing called a nation, and you're a member of it, and you had no choice, and you're born into it. And that gives us the rights to view anything, anywhere, and you the rights not to view anything, anywhere. It's a very, and that became the locus of identity. I view myself foremost as a German, as French, and as it became, global in this sort of age of exploration. And so the interesting thing about crypto, particularly with this privacy context, is that the political theorists will say, what is a nation? A nation is a consensual, it's an imagined community is the technical language. And they say it's an imagined community governed by consensus, instantiated by currency and contract, excluding privacy. And so that's actually what crypto is Nation 2.0, able to control that privacy. And so I think the battle isn't just for regulations or even politics. I think the battle is that the reason why a nation state gets nervous is because this is coming in a fundamentally different way. It's not AI giving asymmetric advantage to the viewer and in Foucault's panopticon, able to see everything. It's actually crypto giving asymmetric advantage to the little people all along the long tail that have asymmetric advantage against that. AI is coming for your job, crypto is coming for your identity and your soul, and that will be protected through you controlling your identity with absolute self-sovereignty. I don't know if that's what you're going for, but that's
a perfect way to close this out. I just want to say on the final point that we talk often, or we heard a lot of conversations about self-sovereignty with crypto, and I think there's an element of that, but what I actually think self-sovereignty is a form of self-actualization. It's the ability of people to organize into economic systems that are for larger commercial constructs than have ever existed before. The scale of opportunity in crypto is unlike any financial system we've ever imagined before. And I, for one, am really excited for that tomorrow. Josh, I want to thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Very good. Is that okay?
Yeah, it's perfect.